Hi, I'm Betty McLean, and welcome to Healthcare Hope, a podcast for nurses. With 2 decades of bedside experience and now as a certified burnout coach, I understand the challenges nurses face. I believe that all stress is manageable and burnout is not inevitable. Join me in building strength for yourself and hope for the future of our industry. Welcome back to Healthcare Hope, podcast that supports nurses in creating balance and healing, both in their personal and their professional lives. I'm your host, Betty McLean, and this week's episode is a bit of a follow-up to last week's discussion about toxic coworkers. Last episode, we talked about how to deal with those toxic people in your life and how to think about them. But today, we're going to flip the script. Have you ever stopped to wonder if you might be the one bringing the negativity into your work environment? Have you ever had that thought like, maybe I'm the negative Nancy, negative Nelly, the negative nurse? It's not always easy to admit, but we're going to talk about how this negativity can creep into our attitudes and our behaviors as nurses. And more importantly, how to shift from being that negative person to someone who has more positivity and more hope. So we've all had bad days or rough weeks where we feel overworked, underappreciated, and like everything's going wrong. It is very natural to feel frustrated in high stress environments like healthcare. But when that negativity becomes your default state, it can impact not only your well-being, but all the people around you. So, how do you know if you've fallen into a negative mindset? You probably already know, but here are a few signs. You find yourself constantly complaining. You're feeling cynical about your patients and your coworkers. You assume the worst in every situation, or you just have an overall negative outlook on your job, regardless of what is happening. Maybe you find yourself gossiping or venting more often than you'd like. I recently had a client whose main concern during her consultation call was that she had become the most negative person she knew, and she hated it. So, if this is you, stay with me because there is hope. Negativity is contagious. It's like a heavy cloud that follows you and affects everyone in your area. And while it might feel justified in the moment, over time, it takes a toll on your mental health, your relationships with your coworkers, and even your physical health. The more scientists study stress and mindset, the more they're seeing a correlation between negative, cynical mindset and disease processes. Let's be real though, nursing is tough. High acuity patient loads, understaffed units, dealing with the emotions of patients and families, not to mention your own stressors outside of work. It's not surprising that negativity sneaks in. Often, negativity is a defense mechanism. When we feel burned out, exhausted, or undervalued, it's easier to complain than to acknowledge how deeply these things are hurting us. Cynicism becomes a shield that we use to protect ourselves from the emotional weight of the job. It's actually the hallmark behavior of the middle stage burnout. But here's the truth. Negativity does not actually protect you. It drains you further. And it's preventing you from finding solutions and joy that could actually help you thrive in your roles. Problem solving requires an open and optimistic mindset. And when you're focused on the problem, focused on negativity, and live in that chronic cynicism, the brain has a very difficult time being creative enough to problem solve. So, what can you do if you recognize that you have slipped more and more into a negative mindset? The first step is simply awareness. Just notice that you are being negative, and that's powerful. Once you realize it's happening, then you can choose a different path. So, here are several areas you'll want to consider as you shift from negativity to a more positive, empowering mindset. The First is to challenge your thoughts. So you can ask yourself when you notice yourself being negative or cynical, ask yourself, is this thought helpful? Is it true? Oftentimes, negative thoughts are exaggerated or distorted or don't take everything into account. By challenging the thought, you can begin to change the narrative of your mind. I like to use the canoe on a lake analogy. Imagine you're in a little canoe and you're floating on a lazy river in late summer. There are a few sticks and some leaves floating by your little boat. Now imagine you reach over and you pick up what you thought was a pretty leaf. But when you get it out of the water, you realize it's starting to decay. Would you keep that leaf in the boat with you, or would you toss it back? Your mind is like the lazy river, and the thoughts in your brain are like the little leaves and sticks floating by. You don't get to pick the thoughts, the conscious and subconscious thoughts that float around your canoe, but you do get to pick which thoughts you focus on, which thoughts you believe and repeat over and over, which ones you keep in the boat with you. So, which thoughts you focus on is what makes you, quote unquote, a positive or negative person. You can simply choose to focus more often on thoughts that are helpful and thoughts that bring you more positivity or more joy. Next thing I want to talk about is gratitude practice. And I know it sounds simple, but taking time to focus on what you're grateful for, whether it's a supportive coworker, a small victory with a patient, or even just getting through a tough shift, focusing on things for which you are grateful can break the cycle of negativity. I like to have my clients take time to focus on just one person, one place, or one thing for which they are grateful, and spend a minute or two allowing that feeling of gratitude and joy and love to just fill them up. There's a lot of ways to have an attitude of gratitude, but I want to encourage you to make it a practice if you're wanting to become a more positive minded person. The next is you need to limit your venting. While I know it's important to express frustrations, and it's very important to tell your managers or people above you your concerns, constant venting really only reinforces negativity. It's very important to notice when you're venting and who you're choosing to vent to. Are you venting to the new grad who's trying to get his footing on your unit? Or are you venting to the seasoned nurse or the manager who has demonstrated a healthy, positive mindset and has told you to come to her if you need help? This matters. When we vent to people who have no or little power or who are already overwhelmed, we're potentially making their life a lot more difficult. We're also not empowering ourselves. Instead of venting, try to consider the problem and see if you can find a solution, even one that's not likely to happen. You're just asking your brain to solve the puzzle rather than to focus on the problem. It moves your brain to a more open space mentally. If you catch yourself complaining, shift your brain, shift the conversation to what could I do about this if I had the power? The last thing I want to talk about is self-care. If you're constantly feeling negative, it's a huge red flag that you're in burnout, probably middle or late stage burnout. Self-care isn't just a fancy buzzword or something you add to your to-do list. It is essential for maintaining your mental and emotional health. I like to have my clients think about self-care in terms of self-kindness and self-compassion. How would you care for yourself if you were giving yourself the same compassion that you would give your children or your best friend? It will look different to everyone. Prioritize rest and activities that replenish you. Once you start to recognize and shift your negative patterns, you'll begin to see changes, not only in how you feel, but in how others perceive you. As nurses, we are leaders by nature. When you model a positive, solution focused mindset, you inspire those around you to do the same. The client I mentioned earlier, who had become so negative, she was able to begin noticing the negativity and choosing more helpful thoughts. And when she learned to choose more positive thoughts, the words she spoke became more uplifting too. She literally solved a problem at work that she was having because she was more focused on solutions and positivity. This does not mean you ignore the hard stuff and pretend that everything is fine when it isn't. But it does mean you choose to not stay stuck in the negativity. You choose not to repeat those negative thoughts to yourself over and over ad nauseum. Imagine the little canoe. You choose not to bring those decaying leaves into your canoe with you. By doing this, you set a standard of positivity and resilience in your brain and in your workplace. You lighten the environment where others are probably struggling too. Remember, we all have the potential to fall into negativity, especially in a field as demanding as nursing. But by being mindful, setting your intentions and choosing a different path, choosing more helpful thoughts, you can transform not just your experience, but the experience of those around you. To wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. You have the power to shift your mindset, no matter how difficult your circumstances might be. When you take responsibility for your own mental and emotional state, you not only improve your well-being, but you also make a difference in the lives of your patients, your coworkers, and your family. So the next time you catch yourself feeling negative, just pause and reflect for a moment. And remember, you have the choice to create a more positive reality for yourself. Thank you for joining me today on Healthcare Hope. I really hope you found this episode helpful. Please subscribe and don't forget to share it with a fellow nurse who might need to hear it too. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep bringing light into your world. Thank you for listening today. If you're ready for support and looking for a community of like-minded healthcare professionals, join me in my free private Facebook group called Healthcare Hope with Coach Betty. If you found this episode helpful or encouraging, please share it with your friends and fellow nurses. Subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Together, we can create strength for our lives and hope in healthcare.